Hello, I'm Eleni of I'm a genitourinary medical oncologist, and like many of you, I have been trained to treat across solid tumors and hematologic malignancies. But as you know, I have mainly focused on prostate cancer, not only research-wise, but clinic-wise. So I'm here to share with you my experience in treating men with metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer across both sides of the Atlantic, both the United States and Europe. You know, these past couple of years, we've had a lot of advancement in the field of prostate cancer when it comes to treating metastatic hormone-sensitive prostate cancer. The data is coming in, and what is for me the most important part is the reproducibility of the data, which means the most important part is that we have positive results, but it's not a one-off, it's reproduced. And this for me is the most important take-home message. Also remember that we've come a long way. I remember doing research, the first in human with enzalutamide in 2008, 2009. By 2012, we had an approval of the drug in CRPC. And now, since 2019 and since March 2021 in Europe, we have it approved to be used in hormone-naive prostate cancer that is metastatic. So we've got a lot of experience with using enzalutamide. I can go in a lot of detail, and we can go into caveats, positive, negatives. But when you have these superimposable results, you cannot question them. And you cannot question them as a clinician, of course, but even if you're one of those tough epidemiologists or statisticians, you still cannot question them, right? So enzalutamide, as I mentioned, is available to us since 2012 in the United States. And a lot of us have had a vast experience in using the drug and have seen the results. So when the ARCHES data came out in 2019 and then when followed by the ENZAMET data, none of us was surprised, right? We expected to see a benefit in radiographic progression-free survival, an initial benefit in overall survival, and I understand we will see more data coming forth. Thank God our patients are living longer. But the moment we got this first data from ARCHES, but remember, it was such powerful data that immediately the patients who were on the control arm were released from being in the control arm because it wasn't ethical. And that's potentially the reason why we won't be able to see more data coming forth regarding survival from there. It wasn't a trial designed for that purpose. So the moment we got that positive data, a lot of us, even before the FDA came out and said, yes, you can use it for hormone-naive prostate cancer, we're getting ready. We were talking to our patients. We were calling patients who were just on androgen deprivation alone, and we're telling them that soon enough, another drug would be added to their treatment, a drug that would make a difference in their time to next progression, on their symptoms. So the impact has been quite strong. It's much more than what happened back in 2012 when we got enzalutamide approved for use after chemotherapy. This is now at the start of the treatment. And what we need to be honest about is not so much an impact on us as physicians, it's on our patients. And their outcomes make us look good, right? Xtandi has been a drug that we have used for several years. We now have data that are supportive of the use in metastatic hormone-sensitive prostate cancer. A lot of us, it's what we do. We want to go into the detail of who precisely will get a benefit from this treatment. I would say, as far as I'm concerned, everyone with metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer. And one can come and argue and say, well, would you give it both to low volume disease and high volume disease? Would you give it to men who have visceral metastases? So then we go into the details. I would definitely give it both to men with high volume and low volume. I would give it both to men who have de novo metastatic and to men who have recurrent disease. There is data across the board to support the earlier use. The bigger questions come when a patient shows up and he has liver mets. The sub-analyses are not strong enough to give us data. We don't have enough of numbers. So what do? I still treat these men with a combinatorial strategy. One could argue, I'm going to start with docetaxel. Sure, but be on the high alert and monitor them closely. These are the only cases where I might consider also chemotherapy, but we don't have data to say one or the other. So, my bottom line is all men with metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer are candidates, unless, of course, they have a medical history that is not allowing us to use enzalutamide. And the only medical history that is pretty clean, that we should not use it, contraindicated, is the history of seizure disorder. Otherwise, any patient with metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer. A lot of times, physicians across the world who are trained in oncology consider that chemotherapy is the best approach when you're dealing with a disease of high volume. In prostate cancer, this is unclear. We have to be really honest about the data that we have. We know that androgen signaling is the driver in the biology of the disease, and it's a stronger driver earlier in the disease. The data that we have regarding the use of docetaxel in hormone-naive disease remains strong when it comes to one trial, and that was a CHARTED trial, and specifically to the subset for high volume, remains negative for the European trial JETUG. And when it comes to STAMPEDE, I believe that a lot of you have seen the updated results just right before the pandemic, where after a long follow-up of 7 years, we don't see as profound an impact as we had expected. On the other hand, we have multiple trials that are suggesting that the use of an androgen signaling inhibitor is probably the best course, regardless of volume of disease. So my preference, regardless of volume of disease, is to use enzalutamide when we are referring to men with hormone-naive prostate cancer, in combination, of course, with LHRH analogs. On one hand, you've got a treatment that's a chemotherapy, that is a toxic treatment. We know it. It can lead your patient to hospitalization. It is not the best option for an older patient who has other comorbidities. And on the other hand, you have the ease of using androgen signaling inhibition in the form of combining now LHRH analog with enzalutamide. What do you pick? It's a no-brainer, right? You've got 2 positive trials, no negative trial. You've got multiple other trials. I want you to remember that. You've got a total of 13 positive trials with the use of enhanced androgen signaling inhibition in prostate cancer, all positive. There has not been one negative. Now that's strong evidence to support the role of androgen signaling inhibition in the biology of the disease. Then you've got a better profile. And a lot of you, and me, myself, will say, well, there's a cardiovascular effect, there are other issues. Well, that's why we exist as physicians, to make sure we monitor these patients. So there is a reason why in the United States, the use of docetaxel in metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer is only 3%. And I can tell you, the only time that we actually do use it is when our patient does not have insurance coverage or cannot pay out of pocket for oral pills, because there is that possibility. But when it comes to the European and Canadian system, it's totally different. The whole coverage has different caveats that you are better at addressing. I'm just giving you the perspective from a biology and from a real clinical standpoint when it comes to using these drugs. This day and age, we're using more and more advanced imaging. So invariably, we're picking up more of that low volume metastatic hormone sensitive prostate cancer. And that in a way is a good thing, because we can treat our patients earlier and more effectively. And this is where the use of enzalutamide comes in very prominently, because we now have data to support that in low volume disease, there is a very strong impact. And we might get into this question later, because there are still these physicians who believe that we should use first generation antiandrogens with LHRH analogs. The use of enzalutamide is mandated, I would use a word, or if I were to put it a little harshly, I would consider it unethical to not offer a patient with low volume disease that is hormone naive the opportunity to be treated with enzalutamide in combination with LHRH. So I think it's super important to have these discussions and not defer for later. A lot of times we have the discussion regarding who should treat prostate cancer patients who have disease that is metastatic. And it's an everlasting argument, and I always answer whoever knows how to do it. And we know for a fact that urologists will be the first to meet the patient. And when the patient will be diagnosed with metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer, the urologist will be the one who usually initiates the treatment and will be inclined, as most urologists have been educated, to use androgen signaling inhibition. We've got multiple trials to support that we should not use androgen deprivation alone. And a urologist may come back to me and say, well, I want to leave it for later because it might be better then. I won't have anything else to use later, right? I can't go to chemo. And I say, well, if there is a time where you should use a specific tool, specific weapon, it should be where you have the maximal impact. And all of biology and all of the data, if you compare across the trials, shows the impact is stronger earlier on. And it's not just an impact in radiographic progression-free survival. That translates in an impact in quality of life, in lack of symptoms. And yes, even though not included in the FDA report, survival benefit. We've seen it in the Enzamet trial, and we will see it, I am sure, in the interim and final analysis. So I think, as with everything, we go against our enemy with the strongest tools we have, and we don't leave them for later, right? And that has been my view of life, and most of my patients agree. Of course, it's always a discussion, and it needs to be had with the patient. So thank you for being a part of the community of physicians and personnel treating men with prostate cancer. We have all come a long way since the early 2000s, when we only had docetaxel and old school androgen signaling inhibition. We have now a new indication for Xtandi and enzalutamide in Europe. I think it's time to make the most of it. And I hope that our patients will live better and longer as we owe it to them.